everybody. For those of you who don't know me, my name's Greer, my pronouns are she, her, and I'm the minister here at Adamstown. We are sitting in the Gospel of Matthew for a little while, for a couple of months, the Gospel of this year in the lectionary cycle. And for a few weeks, we're sitting in some of the parables of Jesus. And we talked last week about how parables are a story, and as such, they're an art form, and as such, they're kind of open to interpretation and might mean different things to us at different times. And I have to say, with the parable this week, I really wrestled with it. I felt like I got to a spot and I went, oh, I think this is what Jesus is saying. And then I'd go, oh, but hang on a minute, that doesn't work. What about this? And I've wrestled with what Jesus is on about in this parable. So if you have experiences like that sometimes when you read the scriptures, and you think, what is going on here? You're in good company. Today's story from Matthew 13. Again, like last week, we have a parable using the natural world. And again, we have this metaphor of seeds being planted, plants growing. I love how Jesus uses the creation and the natural world and things in nature to speak about what it's like to live this way under the rule of God and to follow Jesus, what that looks like. And again, there is some description of plants and weeds potentially growing together. I remember when I first moved from a rental property to an owned property, owned by the bank, but I was paying it off, and so it was my garden, and it was very exciting to get in there. And my mother-in-law at the time helped me out. We spent a day pulling out Boston ferns. Has anyone pulled out Boston ferns before? They are a nightmare to get out. They kind of clump and they're really hard, and we dug them out and cleared one of the gardens out the front, and it was such a joy to do that and to have that space cleared. And in the back garden, it was a bit of a higgledy-piggledy garden. There were some big trees with there was a massive gap between them, and then bushes clumped around the base of the tree, and it just didn't work. It didn't sit well with me. So I'm like, I want to rearrange the garden. But of course, you can't just pick up a plant and move it across and then it's balanced and even. So I attempted with this bush that was kind of like a shrubby, messy bush. I thought, if I can dig that out, maybe I can transplant it. I'll give it a go. But I quickly learnt that the roots were also a nightmare and it wasn't going to come out. So I just, I'd hacked at it and I just was like, it's just got to come out now. I've destroyed it. There's no transplant possible. And I'd pruned it back and I couldn't get it all out, but I did my best and I'd got a lot done, and I was like, that's enough. I can't do any more. And my mother-in-law, who was the partner in my gardening at that time, when she came over, I said, oh, look, I've almost got this out. I'm so proud. I've almost got all of it out. She looked at it and she looked at me and she said, that's a maybush. It's really pretty when it flowers. Did you want to get rid of that? I was like, oh, no, I don't think I did. But I didn't know. I hadn't seen it flower and I didn't know. And I didn't see what it was, and I thought I could just get rid of it. And I thought of that experience as I was reading this parable of Jesus telling this story of farmers where the weed is growing up amongst the wheat and the workers want to get the weeds out. But the farmer is worried that the workers won't know the difference between the wheat and the weed and they'll get them mixed up. Because so often in life, we don't see things as they are. We're very good at that, aren't we? Not really seeing things as they are. I mean, many people grow up with a sense of there being something inherently wrong within them, that they're not okay as they are, and they see themselves as inherently not okay, perhaps because of things other people have said. And it takes incredible unlearning to unpack that shame and judgment and see ourselves as God sees us and see the beauty within us. Sometimes we see darkness where there isn't darkness. And similarly, sometimes we don't always see that the things that we're doing might not be the greatest. Things that feel good in the short term, but actually aren't great for us long term. We don't always see things clearly, and we don't always see things as they are. And we're therefore not really the best judge. Who are we to judge? It's a beautiful story of men bringing this woman to Jesus' feet and saying, condemn her, she's a sinner. And Jesus distracts them and says, whoever's without sin, you cast the first stone. Because we are none of us without sin. We all mess up. We all do stuff that's not great. We all behave like weeds sometimes. So who are we to judge others? We love judging others. We love thinking, at least I'm not as bad as them. Oh, look at them. Aren't they awful? I'm so glad I'm better than them. We're very good at sitting in judgment of others, but Jesus spoke time and time again against that kind of hypocrisy. How dare we speak of others like that and not look at ourselves? And this is one of those wrestle areas for me in this parable where Jesus says, don't take the weeds for the wheat because you might destroy the wheat when you take the weeds. And who are you to judge? Like, how are you to see and know exactly what's what? But at the same time, Jesus calls us to stand up against injustice in this world. We don't just let the weeds grow. We don't just let the bad stuff happen and say, oh, well, who am I to judge? It's okay, just keep doing that. No, this parable is not an invitation to ignore the bad stuff in the world. We still need to follow that call of Jesus to stand up for justice and care for the oppressed and right the wrongs of the systems of this world. There is good and evil in this world. We all know and see evidence of that, every time you turn on the news. Every time you have a conversation with a neighbour and hear about what's going on in their lives. And for many of us, the scars that we carry in our own lives, our own trauma and pain, sometimes inflicted by others, sometimes inflicted by ourselves, sometimes by the broken systems within which we need to operate. And there are times when I just pray, Jesus, can't you just take it all away? Can't you just sweep all the bad stuff away? I used to live up in the Northern Rivers, and Mandy Nolan was a character up there. I don't know if anyone's heard of her. She's a comedian, amazing woman, also running for Parliament for the Greens. And I heard her speak at an event that was mostly women, and she was talking about the statistics and the number of times that men are violent towards women, and how many women suffer at the hands of men with violence and sexual assault and abuse. And in her beautiful comedic way, she said, I have a solution for this. I've got a great solution. I reckon it'll only take a few days and men will no longer be violent towards women. She thinks that we should have a little committee of women who walk around with some scissors and a bucket. And they knock on a random man's door and dismember him. And say, we will keep doing this, one man a day, until men are no longer violent towards women. A little bit of an extreme response, right? But she reckons that'd stop pretty quickly. She told this joke one night at a set she was doing, and afterwards a man came up to her and said, I am so offended by your joke. I'm so offended that you would make a joke about dismembering men. It's not okay. I'm so offended. She said, really? That's what you're offended by? A joke about dismembering men? You're not offended by the rates of violence towards women? You're not offended that 50% of the women in this audience will have experienced abuse at the hands of a man? That's what offends you? Anyway, Mandy Nolan tells it, great story, very funny, very, confronting, right? And it's a brutal but effective solution. But again, of course, if Mandy Nolan joking wish eventuated, you're going to get good men who are loving, kind, wonderful men who have never hurt anyone in their lives be hurt by that. So of course it's not a just or fair solution and response. And this is what Jesus is saying in this parable. You can't just sweep it all in one fell swoop because you're going to get the good and the bad. And yet, Jesus does promise some kind of justice, some kind of sweeping, some kind of end and finality to the brutality and violence and brokenness of this world. He talks about separating the wheat and the weed, like the sheep and the goats. And I used to think this was about separating people, the good people and the bad people. But I actually think it might be something a little different to that. I think it might be a little bit more about the wheats and the weeds that are within each of us here and now. What if it was more about the here and now than the afterlife? What if it's more about within me than about between me and you? Within me, there is incredible goodness and love and light and capacity for goodness. Within me, there is also darkness and capacity for selfishness and greed and laziness and hurt and pain to others. It's easy to get caught up in an idea of end times and what the judgment's going to be in the next life. And I'm not really all that concerned about that. I trust in God's promises of love and grace that we will rest in his hands, her hands, their hands, and shine like the sun, as we sang in that first hymn today. In the words of this passage, that we will shine like the sun. I feel confident and peaceful about that. I mean, I don't know what it's going to look like, none of us do, but I trust in that. So therefore, when I think about this parable, I think about what can I do in the here and now. I can choose to live a life of wheat instead of a life of weeds. I can choose and seek to live a life planted in the soil of God's love. So what does that look like? What does that look like to live as wheat growing in good soil? We know that good soil means that a plant can take root, it can grow, and it can bear fruit. And the scriptures talk about the fruit of the Spirit. And when the Spirit is active in our lives bear the fruit of that. So the life that is lived in good soil as wheat is a life of love and joy and peace and patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, faithfulness, and self-control. That's what it looks like. And when our lives bear fruit, we also share God's love with others, and others know God through us. Again, I used to think that was more of a conversion thing, like how many people can I get to pray the prayer and become Christians like me? But I don't think it's like that. I think it's about how can I shine God's light and love in this world? Do people see God in my actions? Do people know more love? Is the world a more just place because of my part in it? Last week I asked the question, what is the condition of the soil of your spirit? And this week I'm asking the question, how do we nourish the soil of our faith to grow as wheat instead of weed? So they're the questions I'm asking for you today. What brings life to your spiritual soul? And conversely, what are the things that pull you away? And the answers to those questions are going to be different for each of us. What are the things that bring life to your spiritual soul, that make you alive and shine in the sun? Are there spiritual practices you do that help you connect with God and remember who you are in God? How are you going at practicing those practices? You can do that as much as you like on your own, but we also need to be in community to nourish our faith. We're not single grains of wheat in a field all on our own. We grow together. We don't come to church because we have to go to church to be good Christians to go to heaven. We come to church because this is where we nourish each other and we grow together and we have community together and we have deep conversations about God and the Spirit and life. And we grow in our faith by having intentional discipleship. How can I be more like Jesus? How can I follow Jesus in my life? How can I be intentional about growing my faith? And what does that look like? And that will be different for each of us. So they're the things that bring life to your spiritual soil. What are the things that pull you away? The weeds that choke, like in the parable last week, the things that make our soil shallow, or the weeds that choke us out a little bit. And again, what are your answers? Because they're going to be different to mine. But what are the things that speak the lie to you that you are not loved by God? That you're maybe not lovable at all? What are the things that provide a short-term fix of dopamine but don't actually satisfy the soul and don't connect you to God? Your addictions, your love of money, selfishness, pride, greed, all the things that we fall into so easily, rather than doing the hard work of cultivating the soil and growing in our faith. There is a difference between the weed that is thrown into the fiery furnace, where there'll be weeping and gnashing of teeth, and the wheat that will shine like the sun. I don't think that this parable is an invitation for us to judge others and to go, oh, wheat, weed, wheat, weed, 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 weed. I don't think that's what this parable's about. I also don't think it's a choice to say, I'm going to be a good person or I'm going to be a bad person. I'm going to be a wheat, I'm going to be a weed. I don't think it's as black and white as that. I think we are much more complex, and inherently we have goodness and darkness within each of us. But I think there's an invitation in this parable. What will I cultivate in my spiritual life? What will I grow? And what do I want more of? I'm going to return to the words of Jesus from Matthew 11 a couple of weeks ago to finish our time and to leave us with a little time of quiet reflection. Jesus says this to you. Are you tired, worn out, burned out on religion? Come to me. Get away with me and you'll recover your life. I'll show you how to take a real rest. Walk with me and work with me. Watch how I do it. Learn the unforced rhythms of grace. I won't lay anything heavy or ill-fitting on you. Keep company with me, and you'll learn to live freely and lightly. May we have ears to hear. May we have courage to act. And may we shine like the sun. Amen.